All right. Good afternoon. On behalf of Fortinet, we welcome you to the Bracketology 101 experience with Jay Bilas. Thank you for joining us. We are excited to hear from our moderator, Jim Oberbeck and Jay Bilas. But before we get into it, I have a few housekeeping items I want to share. During our time together, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. If there is a question you would like to ask, please submit the question via the Q&A box. We will ensure your question is asked in the order it is received. The Q&A box is in the toolbox on the bottom of your Zoom window. On the top right corner of your screen, you will be able to change the viewer perspective. We recommend changing it to speaker view. This way you can watch the experience on your full screen. Now let's get started. To kick us off, I would like to introduce our host for the event, Jim Oberbeck. Jim, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thanks, Kim. Hi, I'm Jim Oberbeck. I'm the Senior Vice President of Marketing for Fortinet. And as part of that role, I get to do some really fun things like this, which I know you're all excited for a unique opportunity to sit here for the next hour, not listen to me, ideally, but listen to Jay and some of his stories and really, you know, his predictions, his concepts around bracketology. It's obviously a topic of conversation right now with everybody's filling out their brackets. So a little background on Jay real quick. I'm sure everybody probably already knows Jay. That's why you're here. You know, you've seen him on ESPN. You've listened to him covered a lot of games. Calls all the top games on the TV. So he was a 4-year starter at Duke from 82 to 86 under famed Mike Krzyzewski, famed coach. And then he went on. I didn't realize he was assistant coach at Duke for their 3 national championship runs. Actually, they won back-to-back in 91 and 92 while he was assistant coach. And in his spare time, he was getting his law degree from Duke as well. So amazing background. And I think, you know, without further ado, I want to introduce you. He's one of my good friends. I spent a lot of time sitting on my couch, having a beer, talking to Jay, but he's never said anything back to me. He's always on the TV, but I say a lot, I talk a lot, but Jay, we've hung out a lot. You didn't know that, but I just want to let you know that we're good friends. But Jay, I want to pass the mic to you and let you do your thing. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jim. It's great to be with you. And you're the lucky one when you're listening to me. You got the mute button there. You get to hit mute whenever. My family doesn't get that opportunity. In fact, I have 2 kids. I have a daughter who's 26 and a son who's 24. And their favorite part of my broadcasts when I'm doing a game is they go on social media and they read to each other all the crappy things people say about me. And they love that. That's their favorite part. So maybe they quoted you a few times. I'm really happy to be doing this. I'm a lover of basketball, and for me, this kind of event is a celebration of the thing I love most outside of my family, and that's the game. And whether it's high school, college, the NBA, international basketball, FIBA, you know, I played professionally overseas. Any sort of basketball tournament gets me going. Whether it's the Olympics or the World Championships or the NCAA tournament. The NCAA tournament, I think, is the best sporting event on the planet. One thing before I get into kind of the nuts and bolts of the bracket and maybe what I think, and we'll take some questions, go back and forth, because even though I pretend that I'm right all the time, I don't really believe I am, and nobody knows who's going to win all these games. But the NCAA tournament is the fairest championship in sports, and I'll explain why. Every league has an automatic bid to get into the NCAA tournament. So your team gets to compete against your peers that you've chosen to be in a league with in order to win a ticket to the tournament by winning your automatic bid. Usually well, almost all is through the conference championship being the conference tournament. And then there's a committee that takes the next best teams after the automatic qualifiers. So you can get in 2 ways. You can be one of the 40 or so best teams or 35 or so best teams, whatever the number may be in a given year, or you can win your league's automatic bid. That's a pretty good way to get in. Football doesn't have that. Football takes 4 teams and that's the end of it. And there are way more than 4 teams that are capable of beating the top 4 or the top 2 or the top 1. But they don't get a chance. It's not as sort of democratic as if you will, as the NCAA tournament is. And I played in this tournament 3 times, and I played in it before it became the 64 team bracket in 1984. And then in 1985, it was a 64 team field. And my senior year in 1986, I played at Duke. We were the #1 overall seed. So we were like Gonzaga, the #1 overall seed. And before that tournament started, our coach, Coach K, came in the locker room and basically showed us the bracket and showed us the 32 teams that were across from our bracket, and said, look at those 32 teams in the two regions across from us, and said, look how many good teams there are. And he goes, we don't have to worry about any of that. And he goes, they're all going to beat each other. There's only one team coming out of there, and we'll play them on Monday night. And we're like that. And he says, the only thing that matters is our path. And we don't have to beat all these teams. We don't even have to worry about it. And so he gave us a bracket, a sheet of paper that had a 4-team tournament on it. And he called it, we were playing in Greensboro, he called it the Greensboro Invitational. And we had to beat Mississippi Valley State and the winner of Old Dominion and somebody, I don't remember who it was. Well, Old Dominion wound up winning, and we played them in the second round. And all of a sudden we could wrap our heads around the field. Like, we didn't have to worry about anybody else. We just had to worry about what was in front of us. And we did the same thing the next weekend. We had a 4-team tournament, won that. And then the last weekend, we went to the Final Four, which is a 4-team tournament. So it was a pretty easy way to think about it. And that's kind of the way for your team that I think you should look at it. Like, what's the path of all the teams you're looking at if they're going to win a championship? So if you're looking at Illinois or Baylor or Gonzaga or Michigan as the #1 seeds or the 2 seeds, whatever, who do they have to beat? How likely is that? And think of it that way first. The teams that are likely to go the farthest in the tournament, find those, and then later on you can look for the upsets. So that's the way I do it. I look, how are the best teams going to do? Where are the stumbling blocks for the best teams? And then I'll look at the upset picks and see if there are ways to separate myself from the other brackets I'm competing with, if you're doing an office pool or anything like that. This year's a little bit different. It's a lot different because of COVID. Teams aren't traveling. They're all in one place. They're not being let out of their hotel unless they're going to the game. They can't even walk outside. That may change as we get further on in the tournament, and a lot of these teams wind up going home when they lose. They may loosen things up, and I hope they do, and let these players out of their hotel, because I don't think it's the right, look, reasonable minds can differ on that. I just don't think, keeping them indoors all the time is making them that much safer. But they got to get this tournament in. There's a lot of money at the end of it for everybody. So what I hope to do, and Jim, break in if you'd like me to do it differently, or if you have questions or anything. I'm not proud, so tell me to, hey, shut up, we want to move on to another region, and I will. But why don't we start with the #1 overall seed, their region, and we'll start with Gonzaga. So Gonzaga is the best team in the country. They've got the best offense. They have 3 players that were just on the AP All-America team, which is extraordinary. I mean, it's not first team, but in the 3 teams in honorable mention, they had 3 guys in the first 3 teams. They had 4 guys, including honorable, 4 guys. Their 4th best player is named Joel Ayayi. He's had a triple-double, and it's the first triple-double in Gonzaga history. And that's their 4th best player. And he's also the 4th best player in the West Coast Conference. They're legit. Now, they played the #2 seed Iowa, the #3 seed Kansas, and they played the #4 seed in their bracket as well, Virginia, and they've beaten all of them handily by double digits. In those games against those seeds, they averaged 99 points a game. They shot 58% from the field. So if you're looking for somebody out of that bracket to beat them, it's going to have to be somebody else, I think, because I don't think any of those 3 teams are going to be able to beat them. I just don't. Virginia and Kansas are battling some COVID problems that caused each of them to drop out of their conference tournaments last weekend. It may not make them worse, but it isn't going to make them better. So whatever you think their ceiling was, they're not going to be better than that ceiling. And I think they're going to be below it, but we'll see what happens. As far as threats to Gonzaga, there are 2. I think Iowa is a threat because Iowa's so good on offense. They're not great defensively. So I don't think stopping Gonzaga is going to be their thing. Maybe they can outscore them, just score so many points that that maybe you get lucky and win that way. But I don't think they're good enough defensively to beat Gonzaga. But there are two teams that I think could cause them a problem. But only one of them's going to, because of the way the bracket is, they're in the bottom of the West. There's only one of them that can get there. One of them's USC. USC is uber talented. They've got the one of the best freshmen in the country in Evan Mobley. He's like 6'10", ridiculously mobile, runs the floor, blocks shots. He was the defensive player of the year in the Pac-12 and the player of the year in the Pac-12. The last player to do that in a major conference was Anthony Davis at Kentucky in 2012. Mobley is going to be the second pick in the draft behind Cade Cunningham of Oklahoma State in the NBA draft. And he's not alone in athleticism, length, talent on that USC team. USC is very good. And especially with their ability to defend, I think they could cause Gonzaga a problem. The other team is Oregon, also out of the Pac-12. Oregon lost in the conference tournament to Oregon State, which surprised me. Oregon State wound up winning the whole thing, which really surprised me. But Oregon's good. They've got really good players, really good shooters. They're pretty deep. They can press, they can force turnovers, and they can control some pace. Chris Duarte is their best player, but they got a player back named Will Richardson, who is an all-conference caliber player that had been hurt. If he were healthy the whole year, he would have been all Pac-12. So I think they can cause them a problem. All right, now I think it's going to be I happen to think it's going to be USC and Iowa playing, and then I'm giving Iowa the benefit of the doubt because they're older and they're a better offensive team, better passing team to get to play Gonzaga, and I think Gonzaga is going to move on. But there are two upsets to look at. The 5-12 game, which is Creighton versus UC Santa Barbara, and the 4-13 game, which is Virginia against Ohio U. And stick with me on this one. So UCSB, Creighton has not been out of the round of 32 since the bracket went to 64 teams in 1985. That doesn't mean this team's not going to do it, but they haven't had the history of doing it, which I think is a factor. UCSB has major conference talent. They're deep. They're very good defensively. They've got a player named Ja'Cory McLaughlin who transferred in from Oregon State. He's a major conference player. Averages about 16 points a game, 5 assists, had 22 in their championship game against UC Irvine, was the Big West Player of the Year. They've got more than him, but they're good. And I think they can beat Creighton, and I think that's a good pick. The other pick for an upset is Ohio U. Now, Ohio U early in the season went to Illinois, who's the number 1 seed in the Midwest. They have a player named Jason Preston. So he's like the LaMelo Ball of this tournament. Really talented guard that can pass it, low error rate. He's legit. So he had like 31 points, 8 assists. I think he had 6 or 7 rebounds, 0 turnovers, and they were a bucket away from beating Illinois at Illinois. That's a pretty good indicator they can play. And because Virginia's had this COVID thing, I like that. And the reason that I'm good with that upset, those two upsets, and I picked them both to happen. If they don't happen, I don't think it matters that much because I think Gonzaga is going to beat whoever comes out of there anyway. So it's a good risk to take because the risk isn't going to hurt you further down the line, if that makes sense. VCU and Oklahoma are both pretty good teams. I just don't see them advancing past a couple of games at the most. But they might be worthy picks to win their first round game. But those are kind of toss-ups in that regard. Jim, do you think, are there any questions on that, or do you have any questions, or you just want to move on to the next region?
I mean, there's some general question. I think the one question I think a lot of people were asking is what happens if a team comes down with COVID in the middle of the tournament? I don't think a lot of people are up in the air on what does that mean? Really good question. So if something happens tonight before tonight, and it looks like they're not going to be able to meet all the protocols, they can bring in another team of the last 4 teams out. And they'd start with the first team out, which is Louisville, and ask them to come in and play. But the bracket is locked this evening and done. So after this evening, I can't even remember the time, but after this evening, once they lock the bracket, if a team has to bow out because of COVID, which I don't think is going to happen, but if they do, they're just going to advance the team they were playing against and it'll basically go as a forfeit or no contest, whatever they want to call it.
that's the easiest thing for them to do and roll forward. It would suck if it happened, but I don't think it will happen. And even if they have a positive, they can separate the player. They all wear these monitoring devices that show how close they are to everybody else in their tier 1 group. They got a small travel group. So that's what happens. They would just forfeit them out.
Okay. All right. Yeah, you can go to the next region if you want. That's fine.
Okay. Why don't we go to the East? The bracket right below the West and the one that would play Gonzaga. Well, would play the winner of the West bracket in the Final Four. Michigan's the number 1 seed. They are the best team in the bracket and have proven so over the course of the season. But they lost their best player, Isaiah Livers, to a foot injury. I'm told it's called a stress reaction, which is sort of a precursor to a stress fracture. So if they rest it and get treatment and all that, he can come back and shouldn't be too big of a problem. Hopefully that happens because he's a great player and they have a great team. But if he can't play, then I don't think Michigan's going to be able to win the championship without him. They're still very good without him, but they're elite with him. Last 5 games, first they went 18-1 to start the season. Their only loss was at Minnesota. They got beat up pretty good in a rematch against the Gophers. Their last 5 games, they're 2-3. So that gives you a little bit of pause. I shouldn't say pause. It gives you a little bit of concern. Pause is a bad word right now. But in those last 5 games, they've averaged 66 points a game, and they're only shooting 43% from the field. When they shot over 50 when they went 18-1, and they averaged about 80 points a game. So they're down a little bit of late. So maybe not playing as well, but sometimes after your conference tournament, when you lose, you can go home and practice and regain that edge a little bit. They have a scary second game. So one of the best games in the first couple of days, whatever day they play, is going to be LSU versus St Bonaventure. St Bonaventure won the Atlantic 10 regular season and championship. They're very good, and they have major conference talent too. But they're playing against LSU that has NBA talent, and those guys are playing really well. The Tigers haven't defended all year long, but they have in the last month and a half. And if they play defense like they've been playing defense, they can score so many points. They're going to be really difficult to deal with. And they've got a player named Cameron Thomas, who's a freshman, averages about 24 points a game. He's a leading freshman scorer in the country. Just a beautiful jump shooter. It's going to be a lottery pick if he decides to come out. So that LSU game is a little bit of a scary game for Michigan. I still think Michigan can beat them without Livers, but that's going to be tough because of the level of athleticism and skill they're going against. Other teams that are capable of getting to the Final Four out of that bracket. Alabama is the best, I think, one of the 5 best defensive teams in the country. They get more credit for their offense because they shoot a ton of threes. And they're an analytics type team where they shoot threes, they try to get the free throw line, they try to get layups. And so they score the overwhelming majority of their points from the 3-point line and in the paint with layups, and not in the paint kind of back to the basket stuff, but just driving it, getting to the rim. Texas is the 3 seed, and this is the best Texas team I've seen since Rick Barnes was there. They're legit. They're older guards with Matt Coleman, who is the MVP of the Big 12 tournament, and all Big 12, and Andrew Jones and Courtney Ramey, and then Jericho Sims. Their big guy is playing the best he's ever played. Frankly, he was first team all Big 12 tournament. I think they could get to the Final Four, but I'm favoring Alabama. And then Florida State's another team because they're so long, athletic, and deep. But they've been turning the ball over lately. And if they do that, their defense, doesn't matter how good their defense is if they're going to turn it over like that, because they're going to give up runouts, which they did to Georgia Tech and lost in the championship game of their tournament. So I favor Alabama to get to the Final Four. But, this one is more of a toss-up as far as the top seeds advancing. And I think you could see a 3 or a 4 seed wind up working their way through there. But I favor Alabama to make it. One thing about an upset, a lot of people are picking Georgetown over Colorado as the sort of the trendy upset, the 12-5, which people talk about all the time. I'm going against the crowd on that one. I think Colorado's going to win. One, they've had to listen to all this. They're the Pac-12 champions, and they got to the Pac-12 tournament final and lost to Oregon State. But they've had to listen to everybody talk about Georgetown's going to beat them. And this many days of listening to that tends to put a little bit of an edge to you. And I think they're better anyway. But they've got a guard named McKinley Wright, who has really been good over his last 7 games or so, averaging 20 points a game. And he's the best guard they've had there since Chauncey Billups. So they're an excellent free throw shooting team. They're second in the country in free throw shooting. They shoot 82% as a team, which that would be a great free throw shooter, let alone great free throw shooting team. So I favor them to win and beat Georgetown. What do you think, question-wise, Jim, on that?
Yeah, there people were calling out other 12-5s you might see. You know, you just addressed the one obviously there with Georgetown winning the Big East outright and blasting through the finals. But any other 12-5s, I think you'll get to some of that. But people are always looking at that kind of always 1 or 2 or 3 a year, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there have been. Yeah, there haven't been quite as many over the years, but there have been some in the last several years. So UC Santa Barbara, we talked about. So that's 12-5 if I remember right. Creighton's a 5 seed. So I'm picking that one. I'm not picking the Georgetown one, although it's a fair pick. But if you think that, like, I just don't think they're gonna, those teams are gonna advance very far after that. So it's kind of safe, if you will. But I think Colorado, once they get past there, Florida State, I think would advance anyway. So I think it's either way you go there. It's just a 1-game risk. And those are the risks worth taking if it's just a 1-game risk. And the other 12-5s are Villanova Winthrop. Winthrop is a fair pick, but they're not. But Villanova's better. But Villanova's without Colin Gillespie, who's their heart and soul leader. He got injured a week or 10 days ago, something like that. And so he's out for the season. They're vulnerable without him. And Winthrop is really good. They got a kid named Chandler Vaudrin, who is 6'7", lefty point guard, kind of has an old man game. He's had 4 triple doubles. And then I've got a guy named DJ Burns, who's 6'7", 270 pounds, who is just a load in there. So they can throw it into him when he comes into the game. Vaudrin can take it. They got some shooters. They defend pretty well. And then the last one is Oregon State, Tennessee, the 5-12. I think Tennessee is significantly better than Oregon State. But Oregon State was hot coming in. They got Ethan Thompson, who's a guard. His dad, Stevie Thompson, played at Syracuse and was probably the best 6'4" power forward in the history of the Big East. Went to Crenshaw High School in California, really a stud. But those are the ones I see. And so I think UC Santa Barbara, in my judgment, is the best pick.
So now on Winthrop, little known fact, Pat Kelsey, their head coach, drove me to high school my sophomore year, and he won a state championship his senior year.
Yeah, he's a Cincinnati guy, right? He
Yes,
and Luke
sir.
Kuechly are really good friends. Yeah, Pat's a good friend of mine. He played for Skip Prosser at Xavier, and then coached with them at Wake Forest. And he's as good a guy as you're going to meet. If there of all the coaches, I think he would probably win a triathlon against the rest of them. He's in unbelievable shape. I think his shirt that he wears is painted on him. It's not really a shirt. I think he just paints it on there.
Makes him look bigger.
Yeah, exactly.
There were a couple questions on the East and West on individual matchups.
Okay.
One was Uconn Maryland. If you had any thoughts there.
Yeah, Uconn Maryland. That's a rematch of a 2002 Elite Eight game, I guess, from the NCAA tournament when Maryland won the national championship. They played Uconn and Syracuse, if I remember right. That's a 7-10 game. Uconn has one of the best offensive players in the tournament, in James Bouknight. Bouknight was injured for part of the season, but they were 11-3 with him. He can get you 25 or 30 in a game. They've got a great defender in Isaiah Whaley, and Tyler Polley was a 6th man of the year in their league and can shoot it. That's an interesting game. Maryland defends very well. They're not a great scoring team, but they're different than they have been. They're not a rim protecting team, but they've got Daryl Morcell, who is the player of the year defensively in the Big Ten. And I think he's going to be the guy that guards Bouknight. So I tend to favor Maryland there a little bit because they've been through the Big Ten. They're seeing some new blood now, and I think some of the Big Ten teams Maryland is one of them, and I think Wisconsin is another, where seeing a non-Big Ten team is going to help them. Because, man, those guys went through the ringer all year, and I think they want to play against somebody else. They've been taking body blows for 2.5 months now, and I think they'll do well. So I've got Maryland in that one. That's a good pick. That's going to be a coin flip game.
Pretty honest question here. Does UNC Greensboro have any chance against Florida State?
Not a great chance. The only chance I give him. So Wes Miller is the coach at UNC Greensboro. He played on North Carolina's championship team in 2005. He believes in pressing and up tempo. So they're going to press Florida State. Florida State has been throwing the ball all over the yard lately. I don't think that they're gonna have major problems with the Greensboro press, but they might. And then Greensboro has a great guard in Isaiah Miller. He's the only player on their team averaging double figures, so he doesn't have a ton of help. But he's put up some numbers. Like, he's the first 2-time Southern Conference Player of the Year since Steph Curry. And some of the numbers he's put up in games, the last guy to do that out of a smaller conference was Damian Lillard. Now, I don't think Isaiah Miller is quite Dame Lillard or Steph Curry, but he's damn good. But I'm not sure one guy is enough to beat Florida State, so I don't favor that happening. But it's possible. There's
a lot of interest around Michigan State. They're basically bypassing Mick Cronin and UCLA. By the way, Mick Cronin, right here from my local high school.
Good dude.
Yeah, he's intense. So they're asking about the Izzo effect of Michigan State, and people saying, can he make a run? They think that Michigan State not only get past UCLA, but even BYU. What are your thoughts relative to the Izzo effect and the tournament?
Yeah, Tom has always had great success. They're another team, Michigan State, that getting out of the Big Ten may be good for them, and play against a team that doesn't know you quite as well. And UCLA certainly qualifies as that. But Tom's got a unique sense of humor about this stuff. Going to play UCLA, I know he and Mick Cronin have been laughing about well, we'll see which one of our teams sucks less in this game, because both of them think they haven't played up to their capabilities, but they're both good and they're both better than their record. So somebody's going to go home incredibly disappointed that they didn't get a chance to go against BYU. I give a little bit of an edge in the game to Michigan State. The one problem is Michigan State doesn't have point guard play like UCLA has. Tiger Campbell at UCLA is a natural point guard, and Michigan State doesn't have that. That could wind up being the difference, but Michigan State's got, I think, a little bit more firepower. So I favor Michigan State, and I think whichever team wins that game is going to be favored against BYU, because I think BYU, as good as they are, they're good, is overseeded a little bit. Although they have major conference talent. They got three guys that transferred in from major schools. Matt Harms transferred in from Purdue, Brandon Averett from Oklahoma State, and then Alex Barcelo transferred in from Arizona. So they've got really good players.
All right. Do you fill out your bracket in pen or pencil?
Pen. I only get one shot at this, and when you're in my job, which is a pretty good job, I rarely complain. But the one thing you don't get is you cannot have different brackets. And if I say one thing on a show and change my mind, you're screwed, because people are gonna call you out on it. Even if you say, hey, I changed my mind, I look at this and change my mind, they're gonna hold you to what you did the first time. So I make sure I make my picks the first time, and then I stick with them, and then I don't have any excuses. I pick it, and then I live with it.
There you go. I think we have one more on the left-hand side of the bracket, question about VCU or Oregon, and we'll go ahead and hop into the Midwest and South here.
Yeah, fair question. Oregon, I favor because I think they're better. VCU is very good. They've got a player named Bones Highland, Nashawn Highland, but his nickname is Bones. He's the player of the year in the Atlantic 10. VCU is a turnover forcing team. They block some shots. They're very difficult to score upon. But I just think Oregon's got more firepower than they do. St Bonaventure, I think St Bonaventure was the best team out of the Atlantic 10, and I happen to think Oregon was the best team out of the Pac-12. Them and Colorado. But Oregon had some injury issues during the year, and they're full strength now. So I sort of, if they had that whole their whole team the whole year, I think they'd be the Pac-12 champ.
Okay. Got two interesting questions before we hop to the other side of the bracket. One, who do you like to announce games with the most?
That's like, who's your favorite child? I work most with Dan Schulman and Sean McDonough. Dan is the nicest person you could possibly imagine, and he would say that's because I'm Canadian, but he's just an exceedingly nice person. McDonough is one of the funniest human beings I've ever been around. Both of them are fantastic pros, but whether it's Dave O'Brien or Dave Pash or you name it, all the different people I work with. I work in the studio with Reese Davis, and he's the best teammate I've ever had in anything. So I'm lucky I work with so many great pros that are so much fun to be around. That's the best part of the job, is you're kind of talking about basketball with your friends, and the only rule is don't curse. That's pretty good gig.
Have you called a game with Walton?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I know Walton very well. And
how is that?
It's awesome. One, he's one of the great guys you're ever going to be around, and one of the most generous spirits that I've ever met. Just nice as can be. And every time you see him, he'll say, and I could have been with him for 7 straight days. He'll say, "Hello, Jay, Bill Walton," and like he introduces himself to you every time. You're like, I know who you are. But he'll tell you every time, say whatever you want. He goes, you can zing me however you want, and then, but he doesn't want, if you ever talk about the game, like during the daytime, he'll go, save it for the air. He doesn't want anything to get in the way of what's going to happen on the air, so and be stale in any way. But you never know what strange trip you're going to take during the game. He could take off and drive his 1969 VW bus, to talking about saguaro cactus or, the invention of cannabis, whatever it would be. But just a wonderful guy, and maybe the top 5 center ever. Just fantastic.
Yeah. All right, let's go down the Midwest side and get some thoughts there, and then I can jump in on some questions specific to the games there. Okay,
Midwest, that's Illinois' bracket, and I think Illinois is the best team. I've got them advancing to the Final Four out of there. They've got Ayo Dosunmu, their great guard, first team All-American. Kofi Coburn is their big guy. Most of you probably know, everybody probably knows that Dosunmu broke his nose and had a concussion a couple weeks back, and they designed this black mask for him that makes him look like Batman. And so I was kind of laughing, like, so Illinois' got Batman in Dosunmu, and they've got the Incredible Hulk in Coburn. So they've got 2 superheroes, and I think that's kind of unfair for the rest of the tournament, because 2 superheroes are probably going to do pretty well. But Dosunmu's had a couple of triple doubles. Coburn averages 17 points. I mean, like just a smidge under 10 rebounds a game, and so he's a double guy. They're the best team. Now, the best team in this tournament doesn't always win, but you don't see a ton of stumbling blocks for them. But there are certainly teams in their bracket that can beat them. The team to watch out for that is underseeded and probably should have been a higher seed, and certainly higher than West Virginia's Oklahoma State. Big 12 team. They're very, very young. A lot of freshmen and sophomores. Cade Cunningham, who we mentioned before, is their best player. Big 12 player of the year, Big 12 rookie of the year, averages about 20 points a game. He's going to be the first pick in the NBA draft. I mean, he is everything you want in a basketball player. If you went into a lab and said, all right, design me the perfect basketball player, it'd look a lot like Cade Cunningham. He's not quite perfect. I'm not suggesting that, but he isn't far off. Perfect is in sight as far as talent is concerned. Downside for them is they got a tough draw. So their first game, they're playing Liberty. And Liberty is very much like playing Virginia because Richie McKay, their coach, coached with Tony Bennett. And he's something else, Richie. He's a great guy, great coach. And he's got a great way about him of keeping his team disciplined. But at the same time, he wants them to ball out. Like, he's not afraid of them playing anybody. Their best player is Darius McGee, who can really shoot it. Uncanny accuracy for a guy who shoots as deep as he does. And they've got a player named Elijah Cuffey, who's a great defender. So I would think Cuffey would guard Cade Cunningham, and that he would take that as a real challenge. I don't think Liberty's got enough to beat him. Let me take that back. They can beat them. They have enough to beat them. I just don't think they will. That I think expresses it better than I did the first time. Houston is the number 2 seed. Houston is a great defensive team and a great rebounding team. If you look at their offensive numbers, they stack up as one of the 10 best offensive teams in the country. But the reason is that they're not a very good shooting team, oddly enough. So how can you be one of the best offensive teams if you don't shoot the ball great? Well, if you go get second shots like they do, they rebound 40% of their misses. That's ridiculously good. And it's them and North Carolina who has, nothing but 7-footers along their front line. Those are the 2 best rebounding teams in the country. So don't be surprised if they wind up playing against Illinois in the regional final. Couple of games that could be upsets. It's hard to believe I'm going to say this, but they're both major conference teams that are going to upset one other major conference and another sort of mid-major. So the 10-7 game, Rutgers against Clemson. Rutgers is another Big Ten team that got beat up in the Big Ten. And once they get out of there, I think they're going to perform better than they did in the league, because the teams are like Clemson would finish down at the bottom of the Big Ten. And they were in the middle of the ACC. The ACC wasn't great this year. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody given what we saw. Clemson plays a slow-paced game. They're good defensively. Their best player is Amir Sims, who is like a point forward, so they can run a lot of offense through him. But Rutgers is better. Ron Harper Jr., Montez Mathis, Jacob Young, who transferred in from Texas, whose dad played at Houston, oddly enough, with Phi Slama Jama. I think they're going to win the game. Rutgers is going to win. The other game is Syracuse. The upset is Syracuse over San Diego State. San Diego State's very good. Oddly enough, like one of the teams that was hurt most, everybody's hurt the same, but that could have won it, and they had their best team ever, I think, was San Diego State last year. They lost Malachi Flynn, but they've got Matt Mitchell back, Jordan Shackle, who can really shoot it. Matt Mitchell was a player of the year in the Mountain West. Nathan Mensah is really good defensively, so they can defend and rebound. But going against the Syracuse zone, the only way they beat Syracuse is if they dominate the offensive glass, because Syracuse is a little iffy on the defensive glass. They don't rebound great and they allow a ton of second shots. So I do think that the San Diego State can win that game, but I like Syracuse to win it. Primarily because Buddy Boeheim is shooting the hell out of the ball. He had COVID, and when he first came back, he didn't play as well, and he's killing it right now. He had 30 in a game in the ACC tournament. He had 29 in another one. Unless he plays poorly, I like Syracuse to win.
So the one game that people are kind of looking forward to, assuming Cade Cunningham and Oklahoma State beat Liberty, and I assume Tennessee takes care of Oregon State, is that Tennessee-Oklahoma State game. If you want to maybe comment if that does come to fruition, what that looks like.
Yeah, there's a lot of orange in this bracket, with Syracuse and Oregon State and Tennessee and Oklahoma State. There are probably some other orange teams I'm not thinking about. Tennessee is really, really talented and really good. They're young, like their best players are young. So Yves Pons is their best defender. He's from France, 6'8" or so, left-handed. They got a ton of lefties. They definitely lead the league in left-handed players. So Yves Pons can guard anybody at 6'8". He can switch out on a point guard and guard him. They've got another big guy named John Fulkerson, who I don't know whether Fulkerson's going to be back, frankly. He took a shot he took an elbow against Florida that tore his face up pretty good. They call it a facial injury, so I don't know if it's a broken bone, his cheekbone or whatever, but he's got an unbelievable shiner. He couldn't play in the championship game against Alabama, or it was a semifinal against Alabama, excuse me. Couldn't play in the semifinal against Alabama. So I don't know, frankly, if he's going to be back. I haven't seen that news yet, but assuming he's not, that diminishes them a little bit. And they get stuck on offense sometimes. Like there are times when they don't score efficiently. When they score, they're awesome. When they don't, they look average, and they're not average. So that's sort of the rub there, is the inconsistent offense. And I tend to shy away from that over the longer haul. I do think they win their first game. And then that's going to be the issue is can they beat, will they beat Oklahoma State? And that's a hard call. I like Oklahoma State to win that one because of their scoring ability. And it's amazing, as young as Oklahoma State is, they're not afraid of anybody. Beat Baylor. They're good. And at the beginning of the year, I wasn't sure that was going to be the case. And now part of that was at the beginning of the year, I didn't think they were going to be eligible for the tournament because that NCAA ruling they got, and the NCAA, their appeals committee never heard the case. They haven't heard it yet. So they figured, let's go ahead and play. So, but they're good. They're very, very good.
West Virginia, how far do you have West Virginia going? It seems like a lot of people on here like West Virginia.
Yeah, West Virginia, they'll beat Morehead State, although Morehead State is got a good team. I just don't think they're good enough to beat West Virginia. I have Houston beating them. I think West Virginia can beat Syracuse, but I don't think they can beat Syracuse and Houston. The one problem that I think West Virginia has is they lost Oscar Tshiebwe, their big guy, early in the season. So their front court was Oscar Tshiebwe and Derek Culver. And Tshiebwe, for some reason, transferred around December, I'd say, to Kentucky. And he can't play this year. He's going to have to sit out, or he sat out. But that was really an odd thing, and it was a huge blow to their interior defense. And so they haven't been as good, but they've been very good. The idea that they got a 3 seed without Tshiebwe is really I think a testament to how great of a coach Bob Huggins is. But they've become a more perimeter-oriented team. Culver is a double-double guy inside. He averages over 10 rebounds, 17 points. Miles McBride is their best player. He's a shot maker, and he can get his own. And then Taz Sherman and Sean McNeil are both really good shooters. This is the best shooting team that West Virginia's had in a while. They could have games where there was a crusade to score. It's difficult for them, and they would have to generate a lot of points off their defense. They're not doing that this year. They can generate it straight off their offense. But I like them early. I don't like them to go deep.
Okay. All right, we can dive into the South. Seems like there's a lot of interest in the South. A lot of cheeseheads on here apparently. A lot of questions around the Badgers.
A lot of cheeseheads. Well, they're the team. I think I said earlier, they're the team that most desperately needed to get out of the Big Ten, because I think Wisconsin is way better than their record. I saw them early on. I saw them beat Louisville by 100. Now Louisville's all COVIDed up. They had all kinds of issues, but that's the oldest team in the country, Wisconsin. I think all of the players in their starting 5 had their driver's licenses for 9 years. But I made a joke during the broadcast that they were older than the Milwaukee Bucks. And it turns out their starting lineup's older than the Chicago Bulls. I was just kidding, but turned out that was kind of right. So let's start. We'll get back to them because that's a interesting first round game. Well, let's stick with it. So the 8-9 game, winner plays Baylor because Baylor's not going to lose to a 16 seed. They play North Carolina. And North Carolina's, I think I mentioned when we were talking about Houston, they're the best offensive rebounding team in the country. They rotate 4 legit big guys through. They're all 6'10" or better. Garrison Brooks, Armando Bacot, Day'Ron Sharp, and Walker Kessler. They've got, it's incredible how big they are up front. And they keep coming, and they kind of wear you down with those body punches of big guys. But their guards are young, and they're very volatile. They turn the ball over a lot in certain games, and they don't shoot it great. Caleb Love and RJ Davis. They played better later in the season, but they're very iffy shooting the ball. And I think Wisconsin is so disciplined, and they can get their own tempo, and they're big enough where they can hang with Carolina on the glass with Nate Reavers and Micah Potter. So I think they'll, and their guards are tough, so they'll send their guards down there to rebound with them too. Brad Davison, Dimitri Trice, all those guys. So I think Wisconsin wins, and I think Baylor beats either one of those teams that comes out. But I like Wisconsin to win that first game. But let's talk about Baylor for a second. So Baylor, it was Baylor and Gonzaga all season long as the best teams, and Baylor can really score. They got 5 guys that shoot over 40% from 3. They really defend well. They average 22 points a game off of turnovers. They force a ton of turnovers. Davion Mitchell is one of the best defenders in the country. He's up for the Naismith Defensive Player of the Year award. So is his teammate Mark Vidal, who's a big guy and built like a linebacker. Jared Butler is their leading scorer. Also, Jared Butler's leading scorer. He's second in the league in assists in the league, but he's also second on his team in assists to Davion Mitchell. And Davion Mitchell is one of the best defenders in the country, and he is second in the league in steals, and he's also second on his team in steals to Jared Butler. That's how good they are. I mean, they're good at every position, and they've got guys that come off the bench and can score. And I think I mentioned they can really shoot it. Their balance is really good between their offensive prowess and their defensive prowess. They haven't played as well since they came back from their COVID pause. They've lost a couple of times, but still they're legit. And I think a little bit more time since the Big 12 tournament to work. I like their chances to advance in this thing. Ohio State is the second best team, and they're the 2 seed, but I actually think they're the second best team. I don't often say that. The seeds are right, but they are right in this one. They've struggled defensively the last 7 or 8 games. Last 8 games are 3-5, and they've been giving up. They've been giving up close to 80 points a game, and over the last 5, last 8, excuse me, 3-5 in their last 8. They've got a tough matchup in EJ Liddell, who's a big guy, steps away. He's about 6'7", but he's very mobile, and he can shoot it, and he shoots fadeaways, and he's got a really nice offensive game. And then Dwayne Washington Jr. is a guard that can really score. I really like him. He scored 32 points in the championship game of the Big Ten tournament, and I think it was 92 points overall, and that's a record. He set a record, Big Ten tournament record for scoring. So they can put points on the board. The question is, can they stop Baylor? And because that's when they would play them, is in an Elite Eight game. So I favor Baylor to go all the way through. The other dangerous teams in there, I'd say, are Arkansas is the 3, and then Purdue is the 4. Both of them are good enough to beat everybody in their bracket, but I don't favor that. Upsets. So what are the upsets to look at? We already talked about the 5-12. That was Winthrop and Villanova. And we talked about sort of Winthrop can do it. I'm not picking it, but it's not a bad pick. It's not a bad pick, and they're not going to be around long anyway, whoever wins the game. So it's nothing that you have to worry about. The other one is the 10-7 game between the 2 major conference teams. Virginia Tech is the 10, Florida the 7. Florida has Trey Mann, who can really score. He had 30 in their game in the Southeastern Conference tournament, and most of them came in the second half. I think he had 25, maybe it was all 30 in the second half. Really, really good player, really good shooter. But Florida can be a little bit up and down on the offensive end. So I'm favoring Virginia Tech in that one. I think Virginia Tech's going to win. So Virginia Tech's got a big guy named Keve Aluma. He transferred to Virginia Tech from Wofford when Virginia Tech hired the Wofford head coach, Mike Young. So Wofford had just had this great year with a great shooting team at Fletcher McGee and Storm Murphy. And Keve Aluma's on that team, and he averaged 7 points a game, 7.7 rebounds. He transfers to Virginia Tech, and in a year, he's first team All-ACC, averages 16 points, 8 or 9 rebounds a game. It's ridiculous how much better he got in a short period of time. And they've got some very good wings in Justin Mutz and Tyrese Radford that can both get to the rim and finish, and they're physically tough, mentally tough too, but physically tough. So I favor them to win. But that's a tough bracket. Let me get this thing out again. So
Texas Tech, Utah State.
Texas Tech.
That's another one. A lot of questions. And then also, can either of them beat Arkansas?
That's a good. I was just to go into Texas Tech and Utah State. So Utah State's got a big guy named Neemias Queta, who is an excellent defender, shot blocker, shot changer. He's 2-time defensive player of the year in the Mountain West. And then they got another player named Justin Bean, who I happen to like a lot because he dives on the floor, and he's tough, and he may not be the most talented player on the floor, but he impacts the game. Do I think they can beat Arkansas? Yes, I do, because they can slow the tempo. Texas Tech can slow the tempo, and Arkansas is young in spots, and especially their best player, Moses Moody, is a freshman. And so that always gives you a little bit of concern when you have a team like that's led by a freshman, but Arkansas is better. They could have a hard time with Colgate though in the first round. I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, Colgate is really good offensively. They can really score. Let me see if I got this right. So I think it's Gonzaga, Baylor, and Colgate as the top 3 scoring teams in the bracket in the tournament. That's pretty good. And I know, look, Colgate hadn't played the same schedule as everybody else. It's really weird. So most of you probably know the NCAA has this thing called the NET, the NCAA evaluation tool. It replaced the RPI, which was a horrifyingly bad metric. It was good years ago, but it was decades. So this NET is a better metric. But there was one thing that skewed it and made it look really bad this year was Colgate was ranked in the top 10 all year long. Well, Colgate only played 3 teams, but they played them multiple times. So they got an entire schedule playing the same 3 teams over and over and over again. So we really don't know. You can watch them and say, okay, these guys are good, but it's hard to tell how good when they haven't played different people. Because you do the same thing over and over. You play the same team over and over again. Your metrics are probably going to look pretty similar over time, and so that was an anomaly this year. But they can score. I just don't know that they can hang with Arkansas the whole way through. I think I mentioned Oral Roberts. I don't think Oral Roberts is going to beat Ohio State because they don't have enough firepower to do it. But Max Asmus can really shoot it. And can really score, gets to the free throw line. He just got a knack for scoring. And so he'll definitely put up big numbers, whether his teammates can join him in that will be the issue. I think we went through just about every game there, at least touched on it, except Purdue, North Texas. Purdue's better than North Texas. North Texas can really defend. So they've got a player named Javion Hamlet, who's their best scorer, 16 a game or so. Good passer, and Zachary Simmons is a really good defender. They control tempo pretty well. They use the shot clock. So North Texas is good. They were the best team in Conference USA, and the coaches in the league really respected them and still respect them. So they're not an easy out, but Purdue's the better team. And unless some of these teams out of the Big Ten go in there and think, well, we're the Big Ten, we're just going to win. I would favor those teams because those teams have been through the ringer, man. They've been through the gauntlet.
All right, we've got about 7 minutes left. There's a couple of general questions. I think you did a phenomenal job, by the way, going through the whole bracket. There's one very betting-focused question. If the Zegs meet Illinois in the finals, what do you think the score will be?
That's a good question. So I was just doing that yesterday, and I think those 2 teams will be in the high 70s, low 80s. I would not go above 82 with that. The scores tend to be a little bit lower in the tournament because it tends to be a little more of half-court games. It's a lot easier when you think about it. It's a lot easier to slow a game down than speed one up. And in the regular season, teams are willing to get up and down a little bit more than they are in the tournament. Coaches tend to get a little more conservative in the tournament. I don't think Mark Few will, and I'd be very surprised if Brad Underwood did. But I don't see the game being much above the very low 80s. Okay.
You mentioned coaches. Who do you think right now in the tournament, best coach, coaching influence relative to the team? There's kind of a bunch of questions around who's the best coach in the tournament today.
That's a really good question. Mark Few, I think, is up there. There's so many coaches with the pedigrees that suggest that, like Hall of Fame coaches, whether it's Jay Wright or Roy Williams, Bob Huggins. Bob Huggins will be in the Hall of Fame. He's not there quite yet. Bill Self, guys like that. Those are the obvious ones to me. I'll tell you who the 2 best cultures in college basketball right now, and I know that sounds kind of like being exclusive, but the 2 best are Gonzaga and Villanova. I don't think Villanova's got the team to match the culture this year because of Gillespie being out. But I don't know any programs that balance being really good valuing what it takes to win and doing so in a way that the players feel respected and they're not demeaned. The coaches are really demanding, but they're never demeaning, and they are encouraging. Like there's accountability, but they're encouraging. Like they want you to go out and take a risk. They're not afraid to lose. So I think those two and the players get along so well, and I don't think it's phony there. Not that I'm saying it's phony other places. And again, when I say those are the two best, doesn't mean that all these other programs, like, they're not right there. Sometimes people hear that differently. Sure. This happened to me years ago. I had said that one player was the best player in his league. And I had somebody show up in my office the next day saying, "How could you disrespect so-and-so?" And I said, whoa, first of all, I was worried I should call security, but the guy was a really nice guy. He just had a beef with me. And I said, look, I said this guy was the best. I didn't say the other guy wasn't great. I think this guy's a little bit better. And so I don't mean to say that other places don't have great cultures. I think the two best are Gonzaga and Villanova right now.
I got a couple of questions on one game specifically, and I don't know how many times the Rambling people play each other, but you have Georgia Tech, Rambling Wreck playing the Ramblers from Loyola Chicago.
I didn't catch that one. That's a good one. Okay, the Rambling Wreck, Georgia Tech, and the Ramblers. First of all, I don't know who Sister Jean is favoring in this one, right. or how far Sister Jean has Loyola Chicago going, because she's got some inside access to higher power information than I do. That's a defensive. If you like defense, that's going to be fascinating to watch, because Loyola is a really good defensive team. They do some really interesting things that some other teams don't do. Like, they never come off a corner shooter ever. Corner threes are really highly efficient threes. And so if there's a drive to the basket, especially a slot drive, they're not going to help off that corner where it's an easy kick out for a step in three. They're going to stay with that person and make you take the tougher two and finish over a defender. Not everybody does that, oddly enough. And they do that. And they're very good with different coverages on screen roll. And they've got a big guy named Cameron Krutwig, who he looks like he should be like a construction worker, because he's so big and burly and strong. And he looks like he does a lot of, he's chopping wood. And I believe he is the only player in the tournament that plays the harmonica. So he's a harmonica playing big guy that can pass. He is so good. But the numbers he's put up with points, rebounds, and assists in the Missouri Valley Conference are matched only by Larry Bird, Oscar Robertson, and Hersey Hawkins. That's pretty impressive. So they're really good defensively, and they've been good before. Like, they have two guys that played in the Final Four team. They were freshmen last time in 2018 when they went to the Final Four. Georgia Tech's interesting defensively because they play this 1-1-3 kind of 1-3-1 looking hybrid zone that changes when each pass is made and has a different alignment. And they've got the best defender, one of the best defenders in the country, Jose Alvarado. And if the ball is below the rim, he's going to get it. I mean, I think if I were coaching against him, I would have a rule for ball handlers that if you cannot see Jose Alvarado in front of you, pick your dribble up. That if you can't see him in front of you, he's behind you and he's going to take the ball away from you. Pick your dribble up, because he's that good. And he's really emotional in the best possible way. I think Loyola is going to win the game. But Georgia Tech is a compelling pick there too. It's an 8-9 game, so those are coin flips anyway. And then the 8-9 almost always loses to the one anyway. So you can play with that one a little bit without too much concern.
Well, Jay, we've got about a minute left. Couple of one-word answers here for you. Got a couple of questions, really good ones, I think. Who do you think's best hire to replace Archie Miller at Indiana?
They get Brad Stevens, great, but they've got to unite behind whoever it is, and the IU fans have to quit complaining about every little thing and unite.
you mean raise $10 million privately to get rid of a coach?
That's fine if you want to do that, but they're going to do it again if they keep
right.
doing all this.
Most underrated coach in the tournament?
Most underrated coach in the tournament would probably be John Gallagher at Hartford. Really good. He doesn't have the team to beat Baylor, but just a fantastic coach.
Last year of college, Michael Jordan or Len Bias?
Jordan was better, but only by a smidge. Len Bias would have been one of the great players of all time had he lived. He was Superman. Amazing.
All right. Well, listen, I think you've done your homework. You told us the harmonica player, the best harmonica player in all of the college basketball tournament. That's the level of granularity you get when you get Jay Bilas. That's all I can tell you. So
I'm lucky nobody asked me who was the second. I'm lucky nobody asked who was the second best harmonica player. I could have been in real trouble there.
You'd probably come up with a name. So, all right. Hey, I really, really appreciate the time. I know everybody on the call really did. You know, great questions, a lot of interactive. This is really a really cool opportunity. Like I said, I talk to my TV all the time and never talks back. This is a great opportunity to get those questions answered.
Jim, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Real quick housekeeping. Everybody on this call, we'll follow up with an email. We have a big bracket challenge with a very large reward for the best bracket. It doesn't have to be perfect. Best bracket will have a great opportunity there. So look out for that on your email, and appreciate your time. Thanks again.